Hi everyone, welcome to Module 7. Remember that we are not having class this week. We are watching this lesson. So in lieu of class on October 3rd and Wednesday, October 5th, you will be watching this lecture, and then make sure that you go into the module and you're going to be in the recorded lesson for the week. This is where you'll find the slideshow and the video. I'll also create an announcement, but you will reply to this recording. So I'd like you to put up something that you learned or liked, and then also put up a question that came up. And then to earn those participation points, your 4 points in the PLC, just respond to one peer to answer their question. And make sure to try to spread it out. Don't answer one question. So that way we're having a bit of a discussion as a community and you're still getting your lecture in for the week. So let's get started. So this week we're going to be looking at systematic and explicit phonic instructions. This is the same video that is linked in the learning materials, but I'd like you to pause my video and get into the slideshow, which remember you can find the slideshow either right here in the link or in the learning materials for Module 7. So make sure you also have the slideshow open. And I just want you to pause my video and you can click on this and you can see it will play. It's 10 minutes, so make sure you have the time to watch it. So pause the video and then watch this lesson with this young child. And then come back to the lecture. Okay, so I feel like that young child had a lot of skills, and the explicit phonics instruction that you saw moved from different, maybe like chunking it out, segmenting. There was sight words in there. There was reading. So there was a lot in that one lesson, and we're going to really kind of dive into how a lesson like this could be planned and then executed. So the objectives for this lesson is to summarize the research behind systematic phonics instruction and literacy acquisition, use phonics assessments to determine the student's developmental level, which we've been talking about this whole course, and then practice multisensory hands-on strategies, which you saw so many in that video. There were many hands-on strategies that happened before and after that child read the book. So there's many roads to reading, and as we know, spoken or oral language is so important as well as the written language. And when you combine those two, you get that automatic word recognition. So as you can see, there's different paths for spoken. So that's awareness of words, awareness of syllables and onset rhymes, awareness of phonemes, and then the written is concepts of print, letter names, and spelling. And then when you put those together, you can see the chunks within the word, both sounding out and writing, and then automatic word recognition of all word types. So the Adams model of reading has this different, so you can see how there's different areas. So there's print and there's speech, and these are all coming together. Much like this model, this is also saying all of these are linked. So during the early phase of reading, context is used. So that is thinking about looking at pictures, guessing words, knowing different letters, becoming more skilled until you are actually reading. And then in this middle phase, the more a word is practiced, the more readily it's recognized. And then you can see down here, as the connection between print and letters and speech becomes stronger, access to meaning is improved. So this is just another way to look at the development of reading. So methods of phonics instruction, and we've talked about some of these before, but synthetic is blending individual sounds. Analogy instruction is using phonograms, so rhymes, to identify. Analytic is identifying word patterns. And embedded is implicit instruction in the context of authentic reading and writing experiences. So these first three are breaking down reading until you have that embedded, which you did see in the video when the child read the book. The child was reading. So putting all of those skills into reading is that embedded instruction. So effective phonics instruction has to develop an understanding of the alphabetic principle, which, remember, is that knowledge of sounds and letters. Incorporates phonemic awareness, which we have talked about, where it's blending and segmenting and learning how to break apart words either by syllable or sound. Providing sufficient practice in reading words. So there's lots and lots of practice in the I do, we do, you do model, and also in small groups, and providing lots of time to hear it being modeled and hear it and then practice. And this leads to automatic word recognition. And this is one part of a comprehensive reading program. So effective phonics instruction is a big chunk in the early years, but it also goes throughout elementary school as one part of a reading program. Systematic and explicit phonics instruction has to have a systematic phonics, which is teaching sound spelling relationship in a logical sequence, which we've talked a lot about how you would start with oral language, moving to letter recognition and sound, then moving to segmenting, and then blending, and then always practicing how to take a word apart and put it back together. Explicit phonics concepts are clearly explained skills, and they are directly modeled. So as you can see, that child that we watched in the video knew a lot of skills. So it wasn't that they're teaching the basic sounds and relationships to that child, but it was more explicit phonics where that child was taking those skills and directly practicing them. So they were modeled and then the child was practicing them. And so there's a really great example in your text on a chart on page 175. So effective instructional techniques are corrective feedback, monitoring, pacing, and signaling. So these are all really important. So monitoring is not only observing within, but you would have those assessments. Pacing is so important. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Where's this child at? Corrective feedback, you always want to make sure that you're giving positive feedback, but when there's something that needs to be corrected, just like in the video, when she asked if he knew what the word here meant, he knew what the word here meant, but there's two definitions, so she gave that corrective feedback. And explicit teaching is model, I do, lead, we do, check, you do. And that is all encompassing with these four check marks right here in that explicit teaching model. Evidence-based practices for explicit phonics instruction will always include the I do, we do, you do model. It's so important that you're modeling, leading, and then checking. And this is something that's repeated over and over again. And you could see in every single part of that video that we watched, that child was having a chance to see the model, the lead, and the check. So I do, we do, you do is going to be throughout explicit phonics instructions. So making lessons. This is a huge one. You want to make sure that you have explicit phonic lessons and they're in a sequence that makes sense. So you need to develop phonemic awareness. You need to introduce sounds, and that also would include spelling. You would be blending the words and teaching how to do that. Building automatic word recognition. So that could be the sight words, and it could also be words that are very common that could be broken down or sounded out, but they just know them. Apply decodable text. So if you can decode, which is breaking it down, sounding it out, and then word work for decoding and encoding. So making sure that there's lots and lots of practice of how to decode a word and having that practice with the child, which we talked a lot about in lesson 5. So you want to begin with the most common sounds and spellings. You don't want to get into the gray area of, oh, well, that doesn't follow this rule. So you want to make sure you're using those CVC words, those words that have the short vowels, those words that follow that vowel consonant, consonant vowel consonant pattern. You want a high utility sound spelling should be introduced to you early. So being able to sound a word out to try to spell it. Sequence moves from simple to complex. So you're thinking about those simple CVC words and moving to more complex. So letter sounds is an introduction, enables words to be formed and read as soon as possible. Sounds of letters that are easy to produce and blend should be first introduced. So you want to make sure that you're not taking any sounds that might be tricky. And introductions of letters having similar sounds and shapes should be separated. Now we know that what are some? D and B. Those look a lot alike. So you want to make sure that you're thinking of those letters and how to separate them. And this is done very explicitly in most curriculum, but it's always really, really good to know why it's done that way. So Erie's phase of word recognition and development, you can see all the phases here. I want you to jump to the next slide. I'd like you to pause my video and play this YouTube video. Hi. So this is an 8-minute video and it'll walk you through each phase. Again, I'd like you to pause me, watch the video, and then come back to the lesson. So thank you for going through that and getting all the way to the end. I think it's just going to point out that this makes a lot of sense in explicit phonics instruction because you're thinking about the pre-alphabetic, partial alphabetic, full alphabetic, and consolidated alphabetic. So it's going from that they are kind of understanding what letters have meaning all the way to they fully understand it. So this is a great model to think, how would I plan my phonics instruction? And then I have some graphics here. If you go down to the notes, you can see that there is a link. So I'd like you to head to the link. This is an awesome link to save. I think this is a very great website. So I like this because it's how our reading and spelling connected, which we have talked a lot about. And obviously you can stop and say the sound of the word. If you can sound it out and you know your letters, you can put them together. So you can see that decoding, we know what that means, right? You're decoding the letters, and spelling is encoding. So you're decoding a word to sound it out, and you're encoding to make the spelling of that word. So teaching reading and spelling together starts with linking the sounds, which are the phonemes, to the letters, which are the graphemes. So decoding is breaking it apart, and you're really trying to put it back together with the letters, which is encoding. So reading and breaking down the decoding process. We see a word in its written form. We segment each phoneme, which is the sound. We then blend those sounds together to form a word, and then we connect the spoken and written word to meaning or multiple meanings. In spelling, which is encoding, we hear a word, we think about the meanings we may know, we segment each phoneme or sound within the word, and then we write the corresponding graphemes, which are letters that represent the spoken sound. So I really like the way that this is broken down. So explicitly teaching reading and spelling together is a powerful and effective approach. There's no need to wait because you're really teaching decoding and encoding in the same line of thinking. If you can decode and the child knows their letters, why couldn't they encode by putting those together? So, where to begin? I like the way this breaks it down, link sounds to print from the start. So you're always, if you're talking about a letter sound, you're showing that letter. If you're saying all the sounds, make sure you have a visual representation of that letter. Explicitly teach phonemes and graphemes in correspondence. So again, teaching the sound with what the letter looks like. A, you would have a picture of the A. Add daily review of previously taught sound syllables, so you're always going back. Use a systematic approach, so building on the knowledge as you go. And provide ample opportunities to apply phoneme, grapheme, mapping, and spelling application. So a lot of those different tools where if they're sounding out a word, they can build it with the letters on the desk. Making sure that having a visual representation of the sounds is really important, obviously to reading, but also in spelling. Explicitly teach spelling generalizations. So there's a lot of simple tools that we could teach in reliable spelling. So if you know the sound of B, it says B. In bat, you would say B, B. That's a B. Sound out the next one. You know the sound of A is A, so you would write A. And reflect on spelling programs and instructions. So think about what you're given. So let's say your school gives you some sort of spelling lessons. You can think about how does that correlate with our reading? Does it line up? Is there a way you can bring them together? So I really, really love this website. I think it was a very beautiful way of looking how reading and spelling connect. And here is that same picture from the website. Reading is decoding, spelling is encoding. And then there is the stages of spelling. So stage 1 is emergent spelling stage. So they're not reading conventionally in most cases, but they might have some letters and sounds. So they might be able to sound out some. Stage 2 is letter name alphabetic spelling stage. They have started to learn to read, and they would be applying the very simple concepts of alphabet sounds, so letter sounds, to spelling. Stage 3 is at the beginning of within the word pattern spelling stage. So most students can spell single syllable or short vowel words correctly, and they're learning the different rules of spelling and learning how to pattern or chunk different letter sequences. Stage 4 is syllable and affixes spelling stage. So this is more advanced. They're able to do multi-syllable words and patterns, and they're also learning specific vowel combinations. So learning how to spell more advanced words. So you can see how a lot of the stages of spelling really follow the stages of literacy. So you can put those together. And here's again what we got straight from the website is teaching spelling and reading together starts with linking the sounds to the letters. So if you are starting with decoding and you're really wondering how do you start with decoding different words? So you want to make sure that you don't start with all words. You don't want to just start in some sort of all words need to learn how to be decoded. There are going to be a specific list of words or types of words that can be decoded. Approximately 50% of the English language or words are completely regular, so can be decoded. But that also means 50% can't. So you need to learn the decoding skills before you start learning all those different rules. So struggling readers may need explicit instructions in sounding out the words orally, and then blending routines. So decoding is sounding out the word, and then you would have to move to blending before you get to automatic recognition. So a blending routine. This blending would come after decoding. If a child can decode, they're ready to learn how to blend. So sound by sound blending. So that's where you'd use every sound and put it together. Continuous blending. Whole word blending would be when they read the whole word together. And spelling focus blending. How is the word spelled, and how would you put those chunks together? So there's a really great chart on page 180 and 182. And there's also activities of blending routines on page 208 to 231 in your text. Phonogram instructions. So building knowledge for systematic instruction in sound spelling correspondence. So this is where you hear the sound and how do you put it with the letter. Although never the sole focus of early reading instruction, but thinking of phonograms or word families should be part of phonics instructions. And there's a really, really great activity in your book on page 232 to 234 to really go into that idea of word families and how that could be not only part of phonics instructions for reading, but also for spelling. Word work. I know that I've been hearing this a lot more in classrooms, but I hope some of you are seeing some word work going on in your internships. Word work helps make the abstract concept of decoding, remember breaking down the word, and encoding, which means putting that word together with letters, so spelling, more concrete. We saw a lot of word work in the video at the very beginning of the lesson. So the student was breaking apart the word and changing the word at the very beginning, and then putting that to practice as they were reading. So word sorting, students categorize words and pictures according to their phonetic characteristics. So what kind of sounds are you hearing, and are those either the same or different? So you could think of, does this have the same beginning sound, the same middle sound, the same end sound? So you could break it up like that. We remember those boxes with the letter sounds that we did in lesson 5. So you're breaking up the letters within words. So remember, I'm just going to put it in here. The boxes had block, and it was broken up into B, L, O, and then a CK. So those blocks would then show the child how you would also have to spell that. So you can decode it by saying b-o-k, and that k sound is a CK. And that's also how you would encode it. We know that k sound could be a CK. So you could take out letters, you could insert, deleting letters. We also saw that in the video that we watched. And dictation provides practicing writing words that contain patterns taught in phonics. So you could say a word, you could even break it up for the child, so you could decode it, and then they would be encoding it. So you could say cat, k-at. Can you write cat? And then they would be encoding what you just decoded. So word work is very important, and you can see how that really ties into the I do, we do, you do model. So this class is all about this research. This is all about the science of reading, thinking about the most up-to-date, most efficient way to teach reading. And there's been a ton of research on phonics. And what we have found is systematic phonics instruction is more effective in teaching. Thinking about where a child's at, what they need, and then doing the I do, we do, you do model for the specific skills. That way, children are reading in a more non-systematic. So if you do systematic phonics instruction, it's more efficient than a non-systematic phonics instruction or no phonics instruction. And it's very rare that you see no phonics instruction anymore. Phonics instruction exerts its greatest impact on kindergarten and first grade. But we all know that even if a child is beyond kinder or beyond first grade, they may not have a solid foundation in phonics. So you may have to go back to these explicit phonics instructions to build that child's base before they move on to be a very proficient reader. Phonics instructions increase the ability to comprehend text for younger readers and older readers with disabilities. Also, systematic phonics instruction, which is what we're talking about, is efficient in preventing reading problems in at-risk students. So it's making sure that that base of learning how to read is on point. You're not only putting in reading as a solid base, but you're also making sure that child has a solid base in oral language and spelling as well. So this all is contingent on interventions and assessments. So when to assess and intervene. So phonics assessments, as we have talked about over and over again, are happening throughout the year, throughout each grade. So phonics assessments for beginning readers focus on the alphabetical principles, decoding, and context-free assessment of the rate of single word reading. So that may be how many single words can they read. And that is mostly done in dibbles. Beginning readers and non-readers are very weak readers and need intervention in basic phonics and phonemic awareness. If children are not reading, if they're just starting the process of reading, or if they're struggling and they're older children, they need to come back to phonics and phonemic awareness, and they need to have it taught to them in an explicit way. So assessments and interventions for older readers should go beyond simple phonics. So if they have passed out of these simple phonics, we should be moving on to seeing how many words can they read per minute. Do they have harder words that they can read, and can they comprehend? Because remember, learning to read, you ultimately want to get a child so that they can read to learn. And phonics assessment includes in screenings, progress monitoring, and diagnostics, which we have talked about and will continue talking about. So that is our whole lecture. Remember that there is no class on October 3rd or October 5th. You are expected to watch this complete lesson. You are also expected to get in and post on the discussion board so I know that you watched it. I also want you to make sure that you're following the upcoming assignments. So October 2nd, you have, let's go back to modules. October 2nd, you have your PLC due. And then upcoming, you have your case study number 2, October 12th. And after that, we will be moving on to our micro teach, which we'll be working on together in class next week. So thank you for getting in and watching the lecture. I look forward to seeing all your comments.